So I have to say it each week. I like to just say roughly what's been happening, just so that when you look back at these episodes, you can put this into context at this moment in time. So this week in the UK, the weather is still shining. We've got a good weekend ahead. We've crept up to number 5, 5th place in the medals table, the Brits in the Olympics, and there's rioting on the streets. Hello, I'm Lucian Taylor from Oxford.
I'm Emily Taylor from Oxford.
And I'm Kieran McCarthy in London.
And this week we have a special guest. We have our very own Georgia Osborne, our senior research analyst. Welcome.
Hello, thank you so much. Nice to be here.
Welcome to the Internet Seriously. And coming up in general, number one, under the spotlight again, the role of social media in validating and orchestrating criminal and violent behaviour. Unethical boosting of academic citations, and Emily wanted to raise that topic, and I've been told not to mention Larry the cat yet. And finally, ICANN have had a board meeting, and they've decided to release a couple of new internal sort of housekeeping top-level domain names, .internal and .example. Thank you very much. I had to say it, we've got new titles. That's from our very own Patrick Taylor, who's an animator working with our own Charlie Wickham on a great soundtrack and a great animation. They're really excited about that, and I love that. That reflects the colour of this podcast, where we're trying to focus on the cheery positive that we can. But this week's been pretty tough, Georgia?
It's been a tough one, I think, for the UK. Yes, it has.
Yeah,
yes.
and I you know, what I personally wanted to discuss with you, and I know Kieran and Emily will have their own views on this, is once again under the spotlight is the role of social media in what's happening. I mean, I still puzzles me actually what is happening. I mean, we've got this thing, like, first of all, before we go on to sort of social media and what's happening with that, just give us a recap of what's happening this week.
Yeah, so I think it was last week that an incident took place in Southport, where unfortunately there was a stabbing and some kids were killed in this stabbing. And as a result of that, a sort of wave of social media inflammatory comments have kind of erupted, and basically coming out of it has been a load of anti-immigration rhetoric that has brought forth riots on the street.
Now this is interesting to you, and I didn't give you your moment at the beginning just to tell us a bit about yourself, but it's very relevant what you're saying.
Yes, so my background is in law enforcement, and I used to do public order, law enforcement and intel. Yeah,
and so we've got this sort of riots thing. Emily, I was interested in what you think, because almost everybody I talk to about, we've got riots. Yes, riots again. Nobody seems surprised that we've got riots, in the context of the US, where the sort of president was kind of whipping people up to feel angry. And what's this about?
Well, it's really, it's horrible. I'm the child of immigrants, and what they always said to me growing up was that Britain's such a tolerant society compared to where they grew up. And, I think we should actually just take a moment, like, this is actually happening in the UK, and this hateful rhetoric, anti-immigration, also based on, Georgia, untrue stories, conspiracy theories. One of the key things that took place in those early rounds of building up to the riots was just untrue stories, right?
Yeah, I mean, before I come to you on that point, Kieran, I was just wondering, we try and provide a balanced podcast here, and we try and empathise with all parties. So in your view, what are the rioters hoping to achieve by smashing up cars, attacking ethnic corner shops, and basically attacking the police. What's in it for them? What do they need? What do they want? What are they saying?
I think the violence is coming from that sort of group of people that every country has. I mean, we used to have it a lot with football hooliganism. And I think it's just an outpouring of general anger and sort of anxiety. We've had quite a few weird, uncomfortable years in this country, and I think that's sort of an explosion of that. And of course, we have had politicians scapegoating asylum seekers, scapegoating Muslims. That's a sort of a worldwide problem right now, Islamophobia. And I think it's just they've been given an outlet and they've used it. The thing that really struck me was they were inviting their kids. So there was kids, teenagers chucking bricks at the police, which are seemingly nothing. That was very strange. And I do think we need to have a proper review and figure out what's going on and what may need to change or who need to be engaged so this thing doesn't flare up and blow up again in a few years' time.
Is that your view, Georgia, that there is this kind of undercurrent, this tinderbox of the dissatisfied who aren't articulate and they can be whipped up?
Well, an interesting thing that happened on social media during the pandemic was that a lot of rhetoric was sort of mixed together with conspiracy theories. So what you had on social media was little groups who were espousing theories about 5G masts, espousing theories about protecting our children. And it actually happens that a Facebook group called, I think it's Protect Our Children UK, are a branch of QAnon in the US. And so along with groups like that, they've sort of brought forward all this rhetoric mixed in with conspiracy theories. And it's actually really difficult to police because you have different people coming in with different issues and sort of coalescing over these sort of seemingly unrelated incidents, but then sort of coming out altogether to either protest or to riot in some cases.
So, Emily, in the middle of this tinderbox, we need a mediatory voice, and so the internet brings you Elon Musk.
Yeah. Off he goes. Yeah. He never disappoints, does he? When you've got a bad situation, Elon's going to make it worse.
Well, I think okay, just to look at it, poor Elon's side. He's a new techie. He's pretty much new to tech. He's taken over Twitter. He was into cars and banks, and he did very well financially. And I joke with the engineers here, one of them, Nathan Allen, one of our directors of tech, and we joke about how Elon's kind of behind everything. So in the Tesla car, we used to be fascinated by this new Tesla car, but they didn't support Apple Play because Elon can do Apple better, and he couldn't, and so we don't want a Tesla car. And now I feel he's understanding the tech algorithm that rewards negativity, and he's like, oh guys, no, let's stop being positive, let's be negative because we get more hits. And so here we're hearing civil war is inevitable. What does he mean by two-tier Kia? What's all that about?
I have no idea. Getting into the head of Elon Musk, I'm not even going to try and do it. But what you do get is that, you've got Elon Musk, you've got lots of other influential figures that, Tommy Robinson, you've got, other individuals who are sort of using their immense reach on social media, understanding that controversial or hateful rhetoric will tend to go viral much more because of the algorithms in the social media platforms. And Elon Musk himself has tweeted and then deleted, conspiracy theories and false articles, and so sort of using their reach but also abusing their role as an influential figure by promoting conspiracy theories and disinformation.
Well, and you're getting these new sort of lords, aren't you? They control so many people that he clearly sees himself as the spokesman on behalf of us all, versus our own Prime Minister, who's the spokesman on behalf of just a few of us. And Kieran, his reasoning, I don't know if that's an oxymoron, seems to be highlighting that one sort of pro-Palestinian action in Birmingham should help weigh up the thinking about what's happening in many incendiary places. And that, you know, and the thrust of his conversation is that Keir Starmer is not being balanced. You know, that apparently there was a guy in Birmingham with a large knife and the police weren't acting at all.
Well, I'm glad he's used oxymoron. I'd pick the oxy off and just say he's being more. It's great. I don't think you can separate this from the fact that Twitter is having trouble financially. The other thing that Elon Musk has done this week is tried to sue advertisers for not advertising on X.
Yeah, that's going to be a very interesting legal case, isn't it?
Yeah, so, I mean, I love the idea that you can sue people for not giving you money. I mean, it seems absolutely...
I'm going to sue a lot of people.
But doesn't...
It's definitely a new business case.
I can tell you, I've worked with Emily for a long time, and if she says something like that, she means it. So which comes to the next thing, doesn't it? What's all this really about, Georgia? You know, Ofcom has published an open letter to platforms saying you don't wait, you know, until we get enhanced powers with the new Online Safety Act. Do something now. Is that realistic? Are the platforms going to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I've always seen that platforms have been very reactive to when this is all, when there's threat to life, or so they you know, things really do get taken down when they need to, and they are very helpful, and I hope that continues.
Yes, well,
I think that also there might be a tiny little bit of deflection going on there, because everyone's like, well, the riots, but at least we've got the Online Safety Act and Ofcom, and then it's like, oh, it hasn't come into force yet. Ofcom's still doing guidelines, so a lot of the things that would empower Ofcom to go after the platforms haven't yet come into force. But Georgia's right. You know, you look at the terms of service of all of the major platforms, and they all of this kind of content goes against their community guidelines. And actually, when it's so clearly a threat to life and public safety, they often are very quick at pulling content down. But I think that where the legislation really doesn't come close, and it's really difficult to regulate, is the insidious nature of conspiracy theories and disinformation. We all know it. We all know that a lot of this stuff has been stirred up through, you know, false information mixed with, you know, real anxieties. But how do you legislate for that? The Online Safety Act is really long, really complicated, but there's almost nothing on disinformation, which is what prompted the whole thing in the first case.
Yes, this is fascinating, isn't it? And now they're sort of saying, if people stir up this sort of thing online, you, the online amplifier, the publisher, have a part to play in that, you know. So I'm interested in seeing that, because if somebody's stirring up some hate or encouraging people to riot, the police are going to go and arrest them for rioting, not for saying something online. But it's the role of the online platform that's interesting.
Yeah, and there's one other point that I would just raise is that, you know, as Kieran mentioned earlier, football hooliganism has played a big part in this. It's an international football break at the moment. And unfortunately, we've always had football hooliganism.
The rioters are bored. They're haven't got anything to do.
When the football starts, hopefully it will all sort of calm down.
First of all, before we go on to the thing that I would normally go on to, I've got screaming in my ear about social shares. I forgot to mention. I did it again. So I'm going to have to give this to someone else. Please remember to like or share online. We need that. We need to build a community here, and that's quite right. And then coming up, it's time for our guilty pleasure online. Georgia Osborne. Our question of the week: what is your guilty pleasure online?
Well, Pinterest. I like looking at Pinterest.
You're the user. You are the Pinterest
That's
user.
Right, yeah. I'm a Pinterest. I look for inspiration for outfits for when I go into festivals or anything like that. It's good. It's a really good platform.
Well, that's a nice safe. I don't think you need to feel guilty about that.
Don't feel guilty about Pinterest. That sounds perfectly lovely.
Yeah, we've had some real guilty pleasures online, I can tell you. Some that we've had to cut recently. Anyway, so moving on to our next...
Kieran, are you a Pinterest user? Sorry to cut across you, Luce. I'm just fascinated by this.
I've started using Pinterest recently because I've just bought a house. And, when you have a sort of blank canvas, you think, what on earth am I going to do? And I found that Pinterest, actually, people spend a lot of time finding things that they like. And if you find someone that you would like their style, they've actually done a lot of work for you. So I've actually started using Pinterest in the last week.
Both of you, 2 Pinterest users right here.
I might join you sometime. Okay,
going on
our
it
next
now.
topic, this is from Emily. You wanted to talk about, well, I'm going to leave the subject to you and you can ask Georgia a few questions about this.
Yeah, so in my other job with Chatham House, I'm the editor of an academic journal, a peer-reviewed journal, the Journal of Cyber Policy. And actually, we have an ongoing dialogue with our publishers about, trying to root out fake papers, paper mill papers that are actually all about boosting people's citations. And I came across
what are people's citations? What does that mean?
Okay, so this is the dark arts of how you get on in academia. And how you get on in academia is by writing papers, having them published in reputable journals, and having other people cite your work, because then you are driving the conversation, you are influential.
So, Georgia, you've published an academic paper, haven't you? What was that about?
I have, and it was about blockchain domain names.
Yeah, you nearly forgot then, didn't you?
I did. It's been a year. A lot happens in a year.
And did you do citations then when you were referring to third-party material? You referred back out to them, and that's valuable to the people. We call it link referencing in sort of internet. You reference other sites, and that creates a sort of a quality score. It helps validate those assets online. Interesting, Georgia.
Yeah. So this story is like, there's an up and coming new early career scholar in the sort of mathematics world who'd published 12 papers, rising star. He's also a 6-year-old tabby cat called Larry. And he's actually gorgeous. He's got sort of lovely kind of goldy eyes, real cutie. And so these...
I have a story about a cat, because my daughter actually has recently acquired a cat, and it spends the whole night sort of stuck up a tree.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he and Larry would be great friends.
How does Larry, the cat, find time to write an academic paper and submit it to a journal such as yours?
Well, working through his human colleagues, a Northwestern scholar called Reese Richardson, same surname as the cat, so because the cat is actually the granddad of Reese Richardson's cat, and Nick Wise from Cambridge. What they noticed was an advert on Facebook for fake citations. And they're in the academic world, and they're like, ooh, this would be interesting to explore. So what they did was they used a fake paper generator called MathGen, produced PDFs, and got them indexed in Google Scholar. So Larry the cat has an H score of 12, which is the sort of like in the academic world, that is right up there. For it, as a comparison, my H score is 8. So you can imagine I felt pretty bummed out at becoming so far behind a tabby cat in terms of my academic impact. So what the serious thing here is actually exposing how much pressure there is in the academic world to boost your citations. We do see a lot of self-citations from our genuine human authors in the journal, which is, frowned on. Sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's not so necessary. And it's all really about, particularly in the US, the tenure track, that you need your citations, and it's a very, very cutthroat world.
What does frowned on mean? I mean, in social media, we ask people to like things. I was just asking people now because everyone likes the crowd. That's what social media is about. Is the academic, is it sort of analogous to that? Just sort of...
It's how the incentives work in academia. It's sort of, you get tenure in the US by having a certain amount of things, and your number of citations is a really, really important metric. But what these scholars are doing is saying, by using the cat example, which did get a lot of attention, is they're saying this is a really rubbish metric because it's looking at quantity, not quality.
And Georgia, we were talking last week with Kieran about AI, and you're getting to the point now with more and more AI generated content. Is the day of academic papers over? I mean, to me, it's a completely dark art. I cannot imagine a worse thing to do for me personally than spend another year of my life writing an academic paper and then trying to get clickbait for it. What?
I mean, I saw a really funny sort of post the other day about, if only we could train AI to do my cleaning and to do my washing so that I could spend more time writing and doing art.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
of course
exactly. Isn't it supposed to be that way
Isn't
around?
it supposed to be that way around? So.
Yeah, Kieran, you've written a book or two. I can't remember how many. Would you write academic papers? Are you into that at all? We've got a cat.
I don't love
Somebody's found a
academic
cat and put it there.
I've been a journalist my whole life. I like to have things that are readable and digestible, I find. And I read a lot of academic papers for research and to get a sort of understanding of the topics, but I do find them often quite turgid. That's the truth. So no, that's not my thing.
Thank you for that. Anyway, Larry the cat, we'll come back to that, I'm sure, many times. First of all, it's time for our Tech Room 101. Georgia Osborne, what is your Tech Room 101? What online would you like to throw in the bin forever?
It's got to be clickbait that's clearly a terrible, like you click into the article, you click into the video, and it's absolutely nothing to do with the title. Sort of, I saw one the other day, like there's a big shark that's been spotted in Cornwall. It's just a big fish swimming around. So it's just,
There's not even a shark.
No, it was a small basking shark.
You could summarise that as crap online.
Yes.
It's just auto-generated crap. Emily, we know from the domain name industry, people park or book or reserve domain names and then hope to sell them in what we call the secondary market. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, that is another kind of dark art, isn't it? It's to try to boost the traffic that domains are generating. So the clickbait is a really important part of the supply chain there.
So Kieran, you book 100 domain names for different businesses, and then you've got to set up 100 websites. How do you write all that content?
It's actually not that hard, unfortunately. I mean, you can use AI to produce a lot of stuff if you're not worried about people actually reading it. You can also use a lot of online services these days. There's lots of people who are actually pretty good based in places like the Philippines that you can hire to write things for you. And you pay them not very much, $1 or $2 per piece. And then you just flood websites with it, and you get the clicks and you get the throughput, and then you sell it. I mean, it's all over the place, which is why we're being swamped with just tons and tons of rubbish information. It's pretty appalling.
Well, which takes us onto our new our next subject, Kieran. Why don't you introduce this? This is about ICANN. Again, they're rolling out more top-level domain names. Presumably, this will lead to more clickbait and rubbish. And I totally agree with your Tech Room 101, Georgia. I think that's a really good one for this week. Kieran.
Yeah, so there's another new GTLD round coming through, which means sort of new endings on the internet. But in the sort of lead up to that, ICANN has done an occasional thing, which is it's protected a top-level domain, the top-level domain being a .uk or a .com, the sort of the very end. And they're protecting .internal. It's gone through quite a lengthy process of talking to the sort of the technical people of the internet. And they've decided that a lot of people use .internal for their own internal DNS management. And so therefore, there is a risk that someone might apply for .internal for their own usage. And then if that was to happen, you'd have massive conflicts across the internet, and you could potentially disrupt people's systems. So they've decided to protect it. So .internal will not be able to be registered. And there's a slew of other ones. It doesn't happen very often. .example, .local, .localhost, and so on. So things that are sort of internet infrastructure-y stuff is protected so that no one can register it. And this is the latest one.
And just remind us, you mentioned internal DNS service. I know what that means as an engineer, but just summarize that for us. You're the journalist.
Well, I mean, usually it's only big companies that are doing this, but if you are running a lot of DNS services, say you're So you're a Google or a Facebook or a GoDaddy or these big companies that are using the DNS all the time in many, many different ways. They often have to test or check out what's going on internally with their own setups. And so often they will use something, they have their own system so that they can see how their own DNS setup works and how effective it is and manage it to make sense of it. Because these can be vast in terms of Google. It'd be probably billions of different bits of DNS. So they run their own internal systems. They don't want that leaking out on the internet or people accessing what's going on or how they structure their own systems. That would be a nightmare for them. So this is sort of an internal management system if you're in the DNS industry.
So, Georgia, you're a new, younger, not white man who, on the behalf of our company, is understanding, and part of your mission is to get into the ICANN community, understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. This sort of typical kind of initiative where they're just making these announcements, how close to you are that? How much do you grasp that?
Well, you are right. My pronouns are she, her. So thank you for getting that right. So yeah, I mean, I'm relatively new to ICANN. I think I've now been to 4. And yeah, it's a very complex place. And I think that's why they have all these different initiatives to try and get more people engaged. Having said that, I'm new to this sort of area, so it'd be great to hear a little bit more about what you think.
And Emily, as an ICANN recovering lifer, I know you did this for love and money. Why are you sending Georgia there?
Well, Georgia said she wanted to, and actually a mutual friend of ours said, for the love of God, why? But, this is actually, I do believe very strongly that it's important to get younger generations involved in ICANN. Whatever ICANN's shortcomings are, it's really important that it functions well. And a part of that is actually having a fresher, younger generation getting into these important things. So this is an example of a sort of boring but necessary thing that ICANN is actually pretty good at. I do feel it's a sort of like, what can I say? It's a bit like, deliberately not seeing a whole load of other things. Like, as Georgia's been writing about blockchain domains, there are millions of these things out there that will be generating search traffic, that will be generating usage. And ICANN is really not articulating any position on this, and it will be really interesting to see how the new GTLD program pans out, because if ICANN is worried enough about name collisions for .internal, which I expect most people, if you stop them in the street and ask them about .internal, would not know what you were talking about. But these type of names that are an alternative naming system, as they start to become more used, will, I think, pose a risk to the sort of integrity of the internet.
And I know we're running out of time today, but these are challenging times, aren't they? Because ICANN has always pushed itself away from what I call reality. The internet has security issues, and ICANN is, their position is, that's not our business. Our business is the security of the operation of ICANN's core functions. And this clearly fits into it, Kieran, the sort of .locals, the .internals. But it seems rather remote. And at the same time, this week, we've had sort of, there's a panel in ICANN called the RRSG, and they've basically made a statement about know your customer and identifying people and pushing that all back to the government, what's called the GAC. I want to save more time to talk about that in depth next week, but I think we're at these new frontiers, aren't we, where there's a thing called name collisions, and that namespace is getting more and more congested with things like blockchain, and these sort of housekeeping to kind of preserve and protect those spaces, I think, is essential. But it all seems to be a bit in its own little world compared to the Elon Musks and the platforms and the application, wouldn't you say, Georgia?
Well, I think we are all in our own little worlds, and I think ICANN, there's the role is the internet, and it's a space that continually changes. And so having young people and encouraging that youth element can really help to shape the way that it is. So I think it's really important that I sort of go and exchange ideas, but I also think there's a real traditional element that sort of does need to be changed, and also an engagement element as well, because it sometimes the messages just come across as being sort of older. So I'm ready.
Thank you very much. We've had it for today. That's enough. A nice, fascinating podcast today. So today we have discussed the role of social media in validating and orchestrating criminal and violent behaviour, the unethical boosting of academic citations, and ICANN have just at their last board meeting reserved a couple of internal domains. Before we finally go, I just wanted to pick up on a comment that we had coming through. If I can get this comment up on the screen. Somebody try and read that out for me. I said that, here we are. China wishes to influence the minds of young voters and easily deploy specific messages to flame riots in the US. Huawei is far worse. They can kill the network during a war. And the point there, somebody's responded to that and said, so it is okay to American social media to influence kids, but not someone else. And honestly, it looks like it's boomers who take them for a ride with Make America Great Again.
BS more than the younger generations.
Emily.
Yeah, a lot in that. I was going to go to Georgia because I didn't know what to say, or Kieran, but
It's a loaded couple of comments there. There is definitely elements of influence going on in different social media areas.
Yeah, so. And I think the generational thing is a really important thing brought out in those comments. You know, children, and you can see it in the Online Safety Act. Children are a real area of anxiety for regulators. You know, how are they being influenced? But when it sort of crosses over into adult behaviour, I guess there's a sense that people should take more responsibility for their acts.
And I just wanted to say to Charlie and Eagle working behind the camera there, thanks for the snappy little comment, and that's been great for us. And we need more of that. We want to respond to things live.
Thank you for your comments, everyone.
Yeah, and please remember to like or share online. We need you and we need your engagement. And finally, I just want to say thank you to Georgia for a fascinating discussion and can't wait to have you back.
Thank you so much.